Good morning, everyone. Today we are examining Ezekiel chapter 34. And as we come into chapter 34, we've talked about yesterday as we read the chapter that this particular message is to the shepherds of Israel. Now, he's not necessarily going to be talking to the physical shepherds of sheep in Israel, but rather he is talking to those who were supposed to be the shepherds of the people of God in Israel. They were supposed to be the leaders of God's people in Israel. Notice what he says beginning in verse 2. Son of man, prophesy against the shepherds of Israel. Prophesy and say to them, Thus says the Lord God to the shepherds. Woe to the shepherds of Israel who feed themselves. Should not the shepherds feed the flocks? You eat the fat and clothe yourselves with the wool. You slaughter the fatlings, but you do not feed the flock. The weak you have not strengthened, nor have you healed those who were sick, nor bound up the broken, nor brought back what was driven away, nor sought what was lost. But with force and cruelty you have ruled them. Here God is talking about the rulers of Israel, the ones who are supposed to be taking care of and leading his people. Instead of doing that, they are taking care of themselves at the expense of their people. And so the leaders of Israel were ones who were, he talks about in verse 3, eating the fat and clothing yourselves with the wool. Instead of taking care of the sheep, they were utilizing the sheep for their own devices and for their own pleasures. They were not taking care of them in healing their wounds or making them better or taking care of the areas where they had fallen short. But instead, they were using them. And in doing so, they were abusing them as well. And so you have those that were supposed to be those who were watching over God's people, who instead were taking advantage of them. In verse 8, he says, My flock became a prey, and my flock became food for every beast of the field, because there was no shepherd, nor did my shepherds search for my flock, but the shepherds fed themselves and did not feed my flock. Instead of taking care of God's people, Israel's leaders only cared about themselves. They were only concerned about themselves. And God says, I am now against my shepherds. I am against the ones that I had put in charge of these things. You know, there's going to be many different occasions where God is going to relate the overseeing of his people to being a shepherd. As a matter of fact, the elders of the church in the New Testament are described as being shepherds. But as you read through chapter 34, one of the things that maybe pops out the most is the fact that in verse 11 he says, Indeed, I myself will search for my sheep and seek them out, as a shepherd seeks out his flock on the day he is among his scattered sheep. So I will seek out my sheep and deliver them from all the places where they are scattered on a cloudy and dark day. In other words, God says, I'm going to be the shepherd. As a matter of fact, he's going to make that statement down at the end of the chapter. It's very similar to the statement that Jesus is going to make over in John chapter 10 about the fact that he is the true shepherd and that his sheep hear his voice and follow him. You're going to have this picture that God is going to paint here in this chapter of what it means to be the shepherd. That the shepherd watches out for the sheep. God is going to speak to the shepherds of Israel because they have not taken care of the sheep. They have taken care of themselves, and they have led the sheep astray. And those that have wandered off, they didn't care anything about. God is very concerned about his sheep. And while he has tried to reach Israel many different ways, and Israel has refused to respond, in large measure that is because they have followed the standards of the leadership that they've had before them. God says, I'm going to hold the leaders accountable for their lack of leadership. The same holds true today. When it comes to the church, there are elders that God has put in place whose responsibility it is to feed the flock of God, 1 Peter chapter 5, to watch out for them and to lead them in the way that they should go. If they don't do that, they will receive the same kind of condemnation that was received by these shepherds in Israel of old, as to the way that they have failed to uphold their responsibilities to the people of God and to God Himself. These are some of the things that we find in Ezekiel chapter 34. I hope that they're beneficial to you. Next time, we will come back and we will examine Ezekiel chapter 35. But until then, have a great day.